Okay, so let's unpack this. We're looking today at this single monumental narrative arc. It's so steeped in irony that it almost defies belief. We're talking about the journey of one individual. It starts on the glorious field of the Melbourne Cricket Ground in 1992, the undisputed champion. And it ends, for now, in the confined walls of Adiala Jail in 2023.
It is a breathtakingly compressed 30-year span. Immense highs, devastating lows. And this deep dive is so necessary because it's not just about tracking political titles. It's an intense exploration of the psychological evolution of a person. We're really looking at the mental warfare waged by a man who had made the impossible possible his whole career, only to find himself running headlong into the iron hands of his own state.
Right, the physical distance between that cricket pitch and that prison cell is 30 years. But the real story here, the psychological thread connecting those 2 points, it's woven through constant betrayals, compromises, and just a degree of sheer unyielding stubbornness.
That is the essential tension.
Ah.
It's what our sources really compel us to ask. How did the cornered tiger mentality, his greatest asset, the thing that let him conquer the cricketing world, how did that become his singular, ultimate political liability? That's the puzzle we're trying to solve today.
So let's start at the beginning, right after 92. He lifts the World Cup, and suddenly he's not just an athlete, he's the undisputed king of Pakistan. But our sources suggest the real psychological shift wasn't in politics at first, but in philanthropy. That dream of building the Shaukat Khanum Cancer Hospital.
And what's truly fascinating is watching him immediately map his sporting strategy onto this huge philanthropic goal. The Cornered Tiger playbook, you have to remember, is all about fighting back when you're written off, when your back's against the wall. He knew that traditional methods, state methods, for funding a free cancer hospital would fail. So he made a conscious decision to sacrifice what he called his ego and become a public fundraiser. He went door to door using his celebrity. For a man of his privileged background, that was a profoundly humbling experience.
And that success, building the hospital, that must have given him a powerful sense of, confirmation bias, right? The idea that if I can do this impossible thing, I can certainly reform the entire nation. But then comes 1996. He enters formal politics. And this is where the story just pivots dramatically. What was the reception?
Oh, the reception was... it was brutal. Not just negative brutal. Especially from the established social classes, he became the absolute mockery of Pakistan's elite and their drawing rooms. Try to picture the psychological whiplash here. This is a man whose single gesture on a cricket pitch commanded global attention. 4 years later, he's begging for votes and donations, and often being turned away by the very people who used to idolize him.
And the media, which usually loves to build up stars, they just dismissed him.
Completely. Journalists labeled him politically immature. They were constantly focusing on his lack of, a traditional political background. And maybe more painful was the rejection from his former friends, the movers and shakers in the status quo. They started actively avoiding him. For someone so used to universal adoration, this was a seismic, humiliating psychological blow.
That rejection had to be utterly defining. Instead of the success he was used to, he just hits a brick wall. And this failure, according to the sources, is what actually hardened his resolve. It didn't soften it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This era was his first real taste of political loneliness. He learned the hard way that cricket popularity does not translate into votes. But instead of thinking, okay, I need to be more flexible, he concluded, my moral compass is right, the system is corrupt. That rejection by the elite was the critical catalyst that just crystallized his political stubbornness. He doubled down, convinced that eventually the people would see his pure intentions.
And that uncompromising stance, that's what launched him into what historians now call the wilderness years. We're talking about the period between 1996 and 2011, a staggering 15 years of, continuous, crushing political failure. His party only won 1 seat in the 2002 election, his own. That kind of repeated failure usually forces anyone out of the game.
It truly was the hardest, longest phase. And political commentators were openly dismissive, contemptuous, really. They called him a one-man show, or, more cruelly, the Tonga Party.
The Tonga Party.
Yeah, it's a term meant to imply he had no reach, no structure, no relevance. Like a single horse-drawn carriage in a landscape of modern political machines.
But if he was dismissed like that, he must have been hemorrhaging money and support. Let's dig into that, the financial and emotional survival. Running a national movement, even a tiny one, it costs money, especially with no big backers.
The deep dive confirms it. The PTI, his party, had virtually no operational funds. And this is a point people often overlook. The party only survived because he personally financed it. He used every single rupee he earned from cricket commentary, from international speaking engagements. We have documented instances of him paying the monthly party office rent in Islamabad straight from his personal bank account. It was a profound personal sacrifice just to keep the lights on.
And if the money wasn't there, I'm guessing the established political operators, the electables, they weren't there either.
Not a chance. No established electable would stand with him. And we should probably define that for you. An electable is basically a regional power broker, often from a political family, whose loyalty is purely transactional. They join parties that can guarantee a win. Khan was the opposite of a guarantee. For 15 years, he often sat completely alone in Parliament. He watched old companions just walk away, seeing no hope of power with him.
That level of political and personal isolation sounds just corrosive. How did he prevent a complete psychological collapse after years of being mocked and abandoned?
The sources are very clear on his emotional anchor. It was his turn towards religion and Sufism, or tasawwuf. For anyone unfamiliar, it's an Islamic mystical tradition. It's focused on introspection, on spiritual perfection. Reading philosophers like Muhammad Iqbal and Rumi became a critical, non-negotiable mechanism for self-preservation. This wasn't just a hobby, it was an ideological retreat. It allowed him to intellectually justify his isolation and maintain his sense of moral superiority against this corrupt system he was fighting. That 15-year struggle, fueled by that isolation in philosophy, it was absolutely essential. Without that psychological hardening, the defining moment.
The 2011 rally.
Exactly. The massive 2011 Minari-Pakistan rally that changed the entire political calculus. It simply would not have been possible.
So the 2011 rally marks the ascent. But here's where we hit that inescapable, tragic trade-off of Pakistani politics. To get to the top in 2018, he had to make a huge compromise on the very principles he'd preached for 2 decades. He had to take in those same electables he had scorned for so long.
And this compromise, this is what launched the final, most dangerous tension. He got power through what was widely called a hybrid system. And we should clarify that term. It basically denotes a political arrangement where the civilian government coexists with and is heavily influenced by the military establishment. His initial perception was probably that he could, skillfully leverage this system to get his reforms done.
But the experience from 2018 to 2022 was this slow, painful realization that the relationship was unequal. The man who made the impossible possible realized that real power lay elsewhere, and that he was just one part of a much larger structure.
And this is where the popular narrative gets a bit complicated. We often hear about friction over big foreign policy issues.
Like the Russia visit right before the no-confidence vote.
Exactly. Yep. But the sources suggest the true, deeper cause of the tension, the one that really sealed his fate, was internal.
Let me push back on that. It's easy to focus on the optics of foreign policy. If the sources point to something deeper, what specific action did he take that was seen as the real red line?
The crucial internal friction point, according to very informed sources, was straightforward. Interference in appointments. And we're not talking about his cabinet. This was about the internal structure of the establishment itself. Khan was reportedly trying to influence or control specific senior internal appointments in a way that would secure his own position for the next election. This was viewed as a direct encroachment, an attempt to fundamentally alter the internal power dynamics of an institution that sees itself as autonomous.
So he crossed a line.
He crossed a line that was politically unforgivable.
So his stubbornness, his refusal to see that that sphere of power was off limits, that's what cost him the relationship he needed to survive. And when the 2022 vote of no confidence came and his own party members defected, it must have felt like the ultimate betrayal.
For him, it was so much more than a political defeat. It was internalized as a profound, personal, moral betrayal. The sources highlight that he just couldn't assimilate that anger. He couldn't process it as a normal political outcome. And that unassimilated fury is precisely what fueled his later direct clashes with state institutions, which all culminated in the destructive protests of May 9th. The political system failed him, and he responded with the fury of the cornered tiger one last time.
And that anger, that whole history, it brings us to this current chapter, Prisoner 804. The jump from a life of, staggering privileged London flats, the sprawling Bonnie Gala farmhouse, to a narrow, uncomfortable cell in Adiala jail is a brutal physical and psychological shock.
It's the ultimate psychological ordeal. Imagine the sensory deprivation for man used to constant activity, power, and being on the world stage. Initial reports detailed severe difficulties, extreme heat, insects, and just profound, continuous isolation. The environment is designed to break the spirit.
But the sources detail this remarkable psychological defense mechanism. He's using his oldest reflexes, the sportsman spirit. How has he adapted mentally?
He's imposed a draconian, strict daily routine inside the prison walls, just like he did as an elite athlete. Vigorous exercise, worship, study. This adherence to discipline is a deliberate psychological shield. What's even more fascinating is his behavioral strategy. He consciously maintains the demeanor of a prime minister toward the jail staff. He never acknowledges his status as just a prisoner. It's a psychological act of internal resistance. It prevents him from breaking down by externally refusing to accept the reality of his confinement.
Which creates this tremendous paradox. His physical confinement has counterintuitively seemed to increase his public sympathy. It's galvanized this even stronger cult following outside. He's controlling external politics silently, almost more effectively than when he was bound by the compromises of power.
That's the power of perceived martyrdom in political theater. However, the sources also give us this final layer of his psychological state today. In that enforced, absolute solitude, the internal conflict is intense. He's reportedly haunted by the realization of his political mistakes and of the wrong advice that led him to this critical juncture. The isolation forces self-reflection, even as he projects that unbreakable strength to the outside world.
So what does this all mean when we look back across the 3 decades? The story of Imran Khan is really the story of a person who tried to change the fundamental flow of history using sheer, unyielding stubbornness. That stubbornness made him a hero in 1992, but it has now left him a prisoner in 2023.
And the tragic irony that comes from every single source is the central lesson for any ambitious politician in Pakistan. Popularity alone, even immense national popularity, is never enough. Political survival in a complex, entrenched system demands flexibility. It demands compromise, a quality that his cornered tiger mentality, the very thing that brought him all that fame and power, fundamentally disallowed him from ever possessing.
An incredible high-stakes drama played out across 3 decades.
Indeed. And the final provocative question for you, the listener, to consider is this. Given this surge in public sympathy and his ongoing psychological resistance, will this imprisonment truly mark the definitive tragic end of his political career? Or is it merely the prelude to a new and possibly far more volatile beginning for the entire nation? That's the answer we'll all be watching for.